Hey guys, Michael here, and today I want to talk about software engineering interviews and preparing for them. So if you're applying for a big five company or a big N company or however you want to call it, you're going to run into algorithm questions. You're going to be doing whiteboarding interviews where you have to solve problems that engineers are giving you with underlying concepts that you should know in and out by heart and be able to repeat and apply what you know to any problem that they give you, however they want to flavor it. So depending on your readiness and how much you've had time to study already, when you got out of school recently, when's the last time you actually got to use real algorithms instead of just editing a web app or whatever you've been doing, you may need months to prepare. For myself, I needed months to prepare because I worked for a company for 9 years, didn't do any actual algorithms, and it was a big change from my daily job to actually go and do these algorithmic problems. So there are a ton of really good resources out there. There's multiple online learning schools that you can join. There's boot camps that I don't know much about. I went the university route myself, got into a company and was there for a long time before I started applying at other big companies. The one absolutely necessary book that you need is Cracking the Coding Interview by Gail Lakeman McDowell. This book is pretty much a requirement if you're going to be applying at these big end companies, at these big companies. She's been on hiring boards for Microsoft and Amazon and Google, and she knows her stuff. So definitely get that book. She'll cover what an interview looks like at each of these places. And so you'll get a good look at what each company is doing and what to expect in an interview loop and the type of problems that you'll encounter. So check that book out, affiliate link in the description below. And that's number one. The second most important resource I have for you is LeetCode. Now, a lot of people hate LeetCode. It's not very indicative of your ability to do a job, but it is indicative of your ability to learn, to apply algorithmic concepts to real world problems. So it's something you're going to have to deal with if you want to apply at these big companies. So LeetCode, I'll have a link in the description below, but you'll want to start with easier problems, work your way up to medium and hard problems. And I will talk a little bit more about what you can expect in an interview and what you should actually know for these. One of the biggest tips about doing these LeetCode type problems, which you should get familiar with, is that you can't just memorize individual problems. You'll encounter different problems in interviews. You'll need to apply the concepts of the algorithms to different types of problems. They'll want to see that you have an idea of how to go about solving any type of problem. One thing that a lot of companies will use to do a pre-screen or an interview is HackerRank. I'm happy that I haven't had the displeasure of using HackerRank, but they do have really good tutorials on YouTube and online write-ups about stuff. There's also Geeks to Geeks, I believe it is, and they have some great write-ups about how to solve some really complicated problems that really breaks it down step by step for you. Again, if you saw my last video, I want to emphasize that it's very important that you're doing these on whiteboard or at least pen and paper. You need to get in the habit of doing it manually by hand and not just on a computer, because it's a completely different environment and you're not going to have the muscle memory of solving problems if you're only doing it on the computer when you get into that interview room. Another thing a lot of people won't be prepared for is answering questions about big O notation, about complexity and size and space requirements. You need to understand how that works. And usually it's a very simple question in these interviews. They're like, what's the complexity? What's the space? And you should just be able to have an answer for it, because the algorithms that you're applying to these problems, they all kind of have a set thing. And as long as you kind of get a feel for it, you shouldn't have too much trouble with these, but you do need to know it. You do need to study it. And I encourage you, after solving any problem, just figure out the big O, and you'll have a good idea of, you'll just get a good sense of what these algorithms require, and we'll be able to communicate that in an interview. So when you're in an interview and you struggle with these problems or you can't quite get it, usually it's okay. Like they like to see you struggle with the problem and actually solve something and not just have something memorized. You really don't want to just memorize a problem. You want to be able to just solve something based on being able to apply concepts to new problems. So if they see you struggle with something, that is even better in some ways. So with my experience, I've interviewed with Amazon, Microsoft, and a couple other medium-sized companies. And I'll tell you that Amazon is a little more difficult with their interview process than Microsoft is. You'll come across LeetCode medium problem. So if you go to LeetCode and you try and solve some of those problems, you'll see like some of the more difficult ones at Amazon. And you should be able to solve those if you're going for an interview there. At Microsoft, usually it's easy to medium, and they ask a lot more questions about you, about projects that you've done in the past. They care a little more about your ability to produce. My impression of Amazon was they ask a lot of leadership type questions, and they'll be expecting you to answer questions that show that you fit into their community, into their model. And what I found is a lot of that is an alpha male type of role. Now they have a lot of other types, especially if you're technically competent. But I really got the feel of like you have to be an alpha male to like get in and do well, and you have to be super self-driven. Microsoft is a lot more laid back. You had more of a conversation, more of a pair programming session with the interviewer. So Microsoft was a lot more laid back. You had pair programming sessions and had a little more of a back and forth conversation with the interviewer. And it just kind of fit my style more. And I already knew that I really wanted to work at Microsoft, so that was my goal. And Amazon was kind of my way to practice for my Microsoft interview. I really wanted the Microsoft job, and I knew Amazon's interview was very difficult. So it was a great way to get the pressure out, to learn something new, and make my experience easier at Microsoft because I've already had that experience. So speaking of these algorithm type interviews, go practice. Go to a whiteboard, go practice with a friend, have them ask you questions, solve them on a whiteboard, and then prove it on a computer. And that will really be the best way to show that you were actually able to solve this problem. So the biggest thing you can do is prepare for these algorithm questions because you're gonna see them. So read Cracking the Coding Interview. It's an amazing book. It will get you prepared to know what you need to know. And go to LeetCode, practice those types of questions. If you can find any recent questions from companies in interviews, I know Glassdoor has some where people break their NDAs and say what questions exactly they had in an interview. If you can find those, then that can give you a leg up because you'll know the type of questions you're going to be asked. But don't just rely on the actual question. You need to understand the concept behind it. So that's what I have for you today. Please let me know if you want to know more specifics, more about these companies, more about my interviews. Love to just help the community and tell you more about myself and how best to prepare. I want you to be able to, I want this to be a conversation, and I want to help you guys achieve your dreams. So let me know how I can help. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and join me next time.